Story 1. My mother routinely comes to conclusions based on very little information and then refuses to change her mind because she's been right before. This is no different. Being right once 10 years ago about a broken-down vehicle doesn't qualify you to be a computer expert. Nor are you an expert on cattle because you watch some YouTube videos. Story 2. She said the United States would be invaded by China by the 4th of July. That was in 2021. I bet her $100 that wouldn't happen. Neither of us have brought it up since that 4th of July, and I would rather not because now she doesn't make such bold claims in front of me, in fear of reminding me she owes me $100. I love my mom, but man, that's stupid. Story 3. I was 14 and was really enjoying biology and learning animal fun facts. Mom had taught me that the difference between bees and wasps was that bees stung and wasps bit. But in school and online, I found out that wasp stung and that the difference was just general morphology and behavior. I told her all of this because, hey, fun fact, and we can now both be smarter about this thing she was misinformed about. I even showed her a picture of a wasp and pointed out the stinger. She just said, "No, wasps bite," and refused to budge. There have been plenty of other things she has said and done to make me think she is dumb since then, but that wasp thing was the turning point. Story 4. My mom once asked me if it was true that if a dog pooped under a fruit tree, the fruit would be filled with poop. I still wonder if I imagined this because I was so stunned she asked. She had fruit trees, and the family dog sometimes pooped under them. Story 5. Stupid is a strong word. But I did have to confront the disappointing realization of how emotionally stunted they are. Part of that is almost certainly due to trauma. They are decent people overall. But boy, do they have a complex web of unhealthy coping mechanisms that, as an adult, I know like the back of my hand. I wish I could have difficult conversations with them, but I have accepted that I can't and probably never will. My mother will shut down and tune out things she doesn't want to hear. My father will get defensive and lash out. They literally just don't have the bandwidth for emotional complexity. A little push and it's straight to fight or flight. It is what it is. Story 6. I couldn't get my mom to understand why you couldn't watch a baseball game in Eastern Standard Time, then get on a plane to Vegas Pacific Standard Time and place a wager because it would be 3 hours later and they wouldn't know the score. She forgot about the internet and I couldn't educate her on real time. I love her anyway. She is my mom. She did the best she can. Now, she is 75 and I can't tell if she's confused or her difficult self. But she did the best she could, and even though limited, her intent is always good. Story 7. My mom absolutely refuses to learn how to use technology beyond the most basic stuff. She will mark everything in her inbox as important and then never look at it again. She signs up for 1 million newsletters and never reads them. Then she complains when she's not receiving mail because her inbox is full. But I can't delete anything because she's going to read it. She refuses to understand that files go in folders and just keeps insisting that I saved it in Word, making attaching files somewhat difficult. She's very confidently wrong about things she used to teach as part of her job, non-technical. If her clock radio needs programming, I need to come by, even though it's literally just scanning to the right frequency and then holding the preset button for a second until it beeps. The same applies to the car radio and clock. At the same time, she insists that she's technical because her father was an engineer and she changed a tire one time in the 1980s. Oh, and she constantly gets into fights with people who treat her unfairly. She's always a totally innocent victim in her own mind and can't see how she's contributing to the situations. She used to be bullied at work, but my recent insights into some of her behaviors make me question whether these bullies were really just disagreeing with her nonsensical behavior. Story 8. I had suspected it for years but always held my dad to a higher standard because I was a daddy's girl. I knew my mother wasn't that smart, but she had odds stacked against her. Mental illness and learning disabilities. What really sealed it was after my dad retired. Couldn't afford to, but that's another story. He decided to treat my parents to a trip to Jamaica because they hadn't been anywhere by themselves in 30 years. They got ready, went to the airport, plane tickets and hotel reservations were made. Without passports. You see, we took a family trip to Jamaica in 1990 without them, so it must mean you don't need them now. I asked the night before they left if they had them, was trying to give a hint, and was quickly shot down, saying it wasn't necessary. You would think it would have caused an inkling to do a quick search online, but not my dad. They lost a ton of money but still went to Jamaica 6 months later with passports this time. Story 9. I found out my mom had lied to me every day about how she used to be an esteemed politician and was chief executive officer of the Pacific Bell Telephone Company when she was 17 after she tested out of high school at 15. It turns out she was a pathologically narcissistic liar. To non-children, the things she said were outlandish and insane, but to a 7-year-old, you only figure it out when she quits her job as a waitress to be a full-time alcoholic and repeats the same stories infinitely. My dad isn't an idiot per se, but he is a coward who refused to leave my psychopathic and abusive mom and all but admitted he settled for the low-hanging fruit and never loved her. Which gives me big idiot vibes. My mom got particularly violent one night, so my sister stole the family car and we parked it at a church nearby. Social workers had been interrogating us for weeks since we kept coming to school in the same clothes, unshowered from constantly having to escape the violent house and sleeping at the nearby church in the car. My sister and I finally forced my dad to move out and serve her with divorce papers when we were about 13 and 16 years old. We had to ask our friends' parents to help us find lawyers and negotiate custody in private. My dad just had to sign the papers, but he didn't trust the lawyers and hired some scumbag that his weed dealer knew. The new guy started negotiating with my mom's sister so she could take him for everything. He finally realized my sister and I had actually ironed out a super fair deal for him by comparison, and he cut ties with the scumbag lawyer. My mom then hired that lawyer to defend her in small claims, and he had so much dirt, and the law so favors mothers in parental issues that dad got stuck with child support, even though we lived with him full-time. Basically, my sister and I had to save my dad from losing his mind in a loveless marriage with a psycho. Being a parentified child, defending one parent from the other really destroys your respect for anyone with any ounce of authority. Titles aren't a thing. Boss, professor, officer, you've got to prove you are worthy of respect. Boy, I wish mental health facilities existed while they were growing up, but all in all, I learned a lot. I learned about the corruption of the system and the real evils of money, how it poisons people. I grew up to be an art teacher and an adult of great integrity, grit, and self-reliance. I lost contact with my mom, and my dad bought a trailer and parked it in an avocado orchard where he smokes weed all day. My sister has built a stable family and is a strong leader in the public education system. Millennials, I can confirm from this lifetime that in spite of all the ways in which you may feel like a failure and inadequate, you are not the problem. Story 10. My dad is having an affair with a married woman and believes that she will stay faithful to him. Oh, and he thinks that spending all his money on nights and days out with her instead of on bills and food is a good idea. Story 11. I have a parent who suggests I pray harder if I mention any issue. I have a solid spiritual life but believe in medical science, psychotherapy, and asking for services and help I need. She doesn't get sarcasm, doesn't get my profession, and is unable to follow the logic of a structured argument. It's frustrating to realize that she will never understand me on a deeper level. But I love her, and she's very tolerant and loving. I know that if she doesn't get something or is reactive, it's not malicious. I just have to adjust my expectations and simplify my vocabulary. Story 12. Cynical of doctors and researchers. Nobody knows my body better than I do. Yeah, tough luck, mate. Good luck with your kidney stones since you don't want to drink more water. Story 13. My father is not unintelligent in all things. He is quite smart in a few areas. His biggest weakness is an inability to learn and admit when he is wrong. Unwillingness to change your view and perspective is the biggest unwise thing you can do. If he does not get something right on the first try, he does not improve on it ever. That is why he was a climate change denier in the early 2000s, and now that it has become undeniable, he thinks it is not a result of human action. I read somewhere that green bell peppers are just less ripe red bell peppers, and he said I was stupid. After proving myself right, he found a tweet from some random person that said green peppers are different from red peppers. I found the same person's Twitter, and he had later said, just to be clear, yes, green and red bell peppers are the same, just at different stages of ripeness. And when I showed that to him, he just did not acknowledge me being correct and left. Ignoring the evidence that contradicts you is pretty unwise. Story 14. I always thought my dad was the smartest person in existence. He is intelligent, I wouldn't call him stupid, but I realized it was only because my mom thinks he's so amazingly intelligent that I believe that. Everything my dad ever said was gospel because he was so smart. We all just followed his lead on everything. My dad always had to be in control of things and the one to do things because everything was too hard for anyone else. No one else would understand. Things include properly loading the dishwasher, mowing the lawns, simple house renovations, writing a curriculum vitae, and taking a car to the mechanics. In one sense, it was good having someone doing that stuff for me. It wasn't until I moved out of home and started doing things for myself that I realized how easy most things are. Story 15. It's hard for me to call Dad an idiot. He was just not highly educated, came from poverty, and when he had money, he bought the things he never had. He told me when I was young that he had the money to buy a house but wondered why he should, as he paid a certain amount for the rental, which was much less than a mortgage, and he had so much money left over. He had no clue about appreciation, that within 10 years that mortgage would be less than whatever rent he was paying. Sure enough, 10 years later, the owner of the house was selling it. Dad was pushing 60 and not able to work like he used to, with little savings and large credit card debt. He got really lucky, as I filed bankruptcy for him. His best friend had a small house paid off that he owned in a somewhat rundown part of town and rented it to him for $900 in a high cost of living area. His friend passed, and his kids tried many times to evict him but were unable to. Dad passed in that house. If not for his friend, Dad would have been homeless or living with me. Story 16. My cousin's family is patriarchal to the extreme. Dad doesn't work, and Mom bears all the responsibilities, feeding the kids and taking care of them. Dad does nothing except remember to take her bank card every month when she gets paid. He reads a bit, so he thinks he knows better. His sons are unfortunately turning out like him, though at least they are focused on trying to get a good education and a job. I have a degree in economics, but they know better than me. I'm not an authority, but I understand financial drivers better than someone who is not trained, and it's part of my job. I can't be bothered to maintain a connection with them because every other conversation is racist, classist, casteist, and involves every other ist you can think of. I feel guilty, but it's not worth constantly being baited into conversations and forcing myself to remain quiet, because no matter what data I have, they have to be right. Story 17. My mother is a horrendously stupid person. She told me she passed high school with mostly DS, and I never understood until I was in high school. She was terrible at her jobs, terrible with money, and hated to be told she was mishandling money, and gets taken in by the dumbest scams ever. I deal with it by keeping her at arm's length, honestly. It might seem heartless, but I've been a victim of her behavior before, and I don't care to continue to do it now that I'm an adult. Story 18. They have been together for 40 years, and they still do not know how to communicate their feelings to each other, on top of the complete lack of personal growth in the 32 years I have been alive. Story 19. Their disdain for anything intellectual, lack of financial literacy, their bigotry and homophobia, while also looking down on people who are working class or different from them in pretty much any way. When they called me a loser with no life for fostering rescue animals instead of trying to find a new husband after I had separated from my ex-husband of 20 years. I'm seriously considering cutting them off. Only the guilt is stopping me. Story 20. When I was 7 years old, I realized I was smarter than my father. He couldn't tell a teaspoon from a tablespoon. I wasn't exactly a genius, but I knew that the tablespoon was the one with the B and the abbreviation because table had the B in it. Apparently, my reasoning was wrong. I didn't know what I was talking about, and he knew what he was doing. Spoiler, he did not. Story 21. Not my parents, but an uncle. As a toddler, I thought it was weird that there were no books in his house. When I was 9 or 10, he told a story that I realize now is a famous urban legend about a celebrity. Even at that age, I knew the story made no sense, but he believed it. Finally, he made a comment once that my hobbies, painting, embroidery, poetry, were not creative because they don't create value, and a better hobby would be Pilates or yoga because it would create value by making me more attractive to men. Story 22. Not my parents, but my grandmother. I remember being very young and wanting to buy something. I found it in a store but thought, I'll look elsewhere first. I looked around, and the only other store that had it was selling it for way more. I said to my grandmother, whom I was out with at the time, "Okay, let's go back there because it's cheaper." She laughed like, "Haha, kids, think they know everything." And it was very much like, "Don't boo me, I'm right." Later, we would be out somewhere in the middle of the day with the sun highest in the sky, and she would say, "Let's cross the road. It's cooler." There was no shade on that side of the road either. I was just confused as to why we were doing anything at all. I love my grandmother to death, and she's still with us as well. She's not the sharpest tool in the shed, God bless her, but she means well. When I was a little kid, I genuinely thought all old people were just not smart because of the way my grandmother is. On the other side of the family, my great-grandmother, sadly long gone now, proved me incredibly wrong, as she was the smartest person I've ever met, before or since then. It turns out just some are not as smart as others.